Christmas dinner smelled like turkey and betrayal. My son David stood up, holding his glass. His voice cut through the silence. "We voted. Dad, you are no longer a member of our family. Get out of this house." The guests froze. Rebecca, his wife, was smiling slightly. I smiled back, handing him a folder. "Here is a parting gift for you, son." He opened it and screamed. Everyone was watching, not realizing that my revenge had just begun. They thought they had destroyed me, but they were wrong. The dining room smelled of roasted potatoes and resentment. The old oak table was scratched from decades of family dinners, bearing the weight of our latest battle. Dirty plates sat untouched. Coffee had gone cold in chipped mugs. David stood at the head, his face flushed, gesturing wildly like a conductor of chaos. Rebecca sat across from me, arms crossed, her manicured nails tapping a rhythm of disdain. I gripped my fork, its cold metal grounding me as their words sliced through the air. "Dad, we need the money," David snapped. His voice was sharp enough to rattle the glasses. "This house is falling apart. You can't keep hoarding cash while we're stuck here." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone even. "Hoarding. I paid the mortgage on this place before you were born." "David, what's this really about?" Rebecca leaned forward, her smile as thin as the ice outside. "It's about progress, John, so we want to modernize. New floors, new furniture, you wouldn't understand." I understood plenty. The repairs were a flimsy excuse. Rebecca's phone, propped against her wine glass, displayed a glossy photo of a leather sectional that cost more than my old truck. David, pacing now, threw a folded paper onto the table. It was a contractor's estimate, bloated with unnecessary upgrades. I didn't need to look at it to know they'd already spent the budget in their heads. "You've got savings." "Dad," David pressed, his voice rising. "What's the point of sitting on it? You're not getting any younger." The jab stung, but I kept my eyes on the table, tracing a familiar scratch from when David at 12 carved his initials with a butter knife, back when he still looked at me like I was his hero. "I've given you enough," I said quietly. "You live here rent-free. That's more than most get," Rebecca scoffed, her laugh a blade wrapped in silk. "Rent-free. This place is a museum." "John, we're doing you a favor by staying." David slammed his spoon down, the clatter echoing. "You're so damn selfish. You think you're some saint, but you're just holding us back." The room fell silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I tightened my grip on the fork, my knuckles whitening. Not the first time he'd raised his voice, but this felt different. Raw. Final. Rebecca's eyes glinted with triumph, like she'd been waiting for this explosion. I could have shouted back, could have listed every sacrifice. The overtime shifts, the college tuition, the car I sold to buy his first junker, but words wouldn't reach them, not anymore. "Selfish," I repeated, letting the word hang. "That's what you think." David leaned closer, his breath hot with wine. "You're damn right. You're not needed here anymore. Dad, we can handle this place without you." The air shifted, heavy with the weight of his words. Rebecca's lips twitched, barely hiding her satisfaction. I set the fork down, deliberate, and stood. My chair scraped against the hardwood, a sound that felt louder than it should. I looked at David, then at Rebecca, their faces a mirror of greed and certainty. They thought they'd won. "I see," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "You've made yourselves clear." I turned, my boots heavy on the floor, and walked toward the hallway. David called after me, his tone mocking. "What? That's it? You're just going to sulk?" I didn't answer. The dining room door loomed ahead, its chipped paint a reminder of better days. As I reached for the knob, a single thought burned through the haze of betrayal. I'd given him everything. My time, my dreams, my home. No more. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling their voices. I stood in the dark hallway, my pulse steadying. They thought they could break me. They were wrong. I'd show them what selfish really meant. My bedroom was a timed capsule, every corner holding ghosts of a life I'd built and lost. The wooden bed creaked under me as I sat, the mattress sagging from years of restless nights. A single lamp cast a warm glow over the room, catching the dust on a framed photo of Margaret and David. Taken when he was 7, his gap-toothed grin stared back. So different from the man who just screamed I wasn't needed. My fingers brushed the glass, trembling slightly. How had it come to this? The house was silent now, the kind of quiet that amplifies your thoughts. I opened the drawer of the bedside table, pulling out an old photo album, its leather cover worn smooth, flipping through. I stopped at a picture of David at 18, holding a football, his eyes bright with dreams I'd helped fund. I'd sold my Ford to pay for his college applications, telling Margaret it was just a car. She'd squeezed my hand, her smile saying she knew better. We'd both believed it was worth it. Another page, another memory, David's graduation. I'd worked double shifts to cover his tuition, my back aching from long hours on construction sites. He'd hugged me that day, his cap askew, promising to make me proud. I'd believed him. Now, the memory twisted like a knife. He'd never said thank you. Not once. And after Margaret's cancer took her 4 years ago, he drifted further, leaving me to rattle around this house alone. Until Rebecca came along, her sharp ambition sinking claws into him. I turned the page and found a folded receipt, yellowed with age. Tuition payment, $15,000, dated 2008. I'd drained my savings for it, telling myself it was an investment in his future. My future, too. Someone to carry on the family name, to share the life I'd built. Instead, he brought home Rebecca, her cold eyes sizing up the house like it was a prize to be claimed. She changed him. Or maybe she just revealed who he'd always been. The album snapped shut. I set it aside, my gaze falling on Margaret's photo, her soft curls, her warm eyes. They'd always steadied me. I tried. Maggie, I whispered, my voice rough. I gave him everything. But trying wasn't enough. Not when he stood in my dining room, spitting venom, egged on by a woman who saw me as an obstacle. The fork I'd gripped earlier flashed in my mind, its weight a reminder of the anger I'd buried. No more burying. I stood, crossing to the window. Outside, snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, blanketing the street in white. The neighborhood was asleep, its Christmas lights blinking through the haze. I pressed my hand to the cold glass, my reflection staring back. Gray hair, tired eyes, but a jaw set with purpose. I'd spent decades being the father who provided, who forgave, who waited, and for what to be told I wasn't needed. A memory surfaced. David, maybe 9, slamming his bedroom door after I'd grounded him. Even then he'd had a temper, but he'd always come back. Sheepish, with an apology. That boy was gone. The man he'd become didn't deserve my patience. Neither did Rebecca with her calculated smiles and dreams of a life she hadn't earned. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. It glowed in the dim room. My thumb hovered over Richard's number. He'd know where to start. Someone who'd seen the world's ugliness and still came out swinging. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless. I wasn't a victim. Not anymore. I'd been their foundation for too long. It was time to build something new. The old oak bar smelled of whiskey and worn leather, its dim lights casting long shadows across the wooden paneling. I sat in a corner booth, the vinyl seat creaking as I leaned forward, my hands wrapped around a glass of bourbon. Across from me, Richard sipped his beer, his gray sweater as frayed as his patience. He'd been my friend since the days we argued over blueprints at the engineering firm, back when life made sense. Now, he was a retired lawyer with a knack for cutting through nonsense. I told him about the fight. David's shouting, Rebecca's smirks, the way they tried to gut me with words. Richard listened, his eyes narrowing, the lines on his face deepening with every detail. When I finished, he set his glass down. The clink loud in the quiet bar. They're vultures. John, he said, his voice gravelly. Think they can peck you apart because you're old. You going to let them? I swirled the bourbon, watching the amber liquid catch the light. No, I'm done letting them. Richard grinned, a rare thing that meant trouble for someone. Good. Hit them where it hurts. Money, pride, find their weak spot. I nodded, my mind already turning. David was impulsive, always chasing the next shiny thing. A new car, a bigger TV. Rebecca was worse. Her ego tied to appearances. Her Instagram feed a shrine to a life she couldn't afford. They thought they could bully me out of my own home. I'd show them what a lifetime of planning could do. Legally, I added, meeting Richard's gaze. No mistakes. He chuckled, leaning back. Spoken like the guy who double-checked every contract I ever wrote. You've got this. John. They don't know who they're messing with. I pulled a small notebook from my coat pocket, flipping it open, my pen scratched across the page. The word accounts standing out in sharp ink. David's finances were a mess. I'd seen the late notices he tried to hide, the way Rebecca flinched when the credit card reader beeped too long. That was my starting point. You're scarier than I thought, Richard said, raising his glass. To justice. I clinked my glass against his, the bourbon untouched. To consequences. The bar hummed around us, a low buzz of conversation and clinking bottles. A jukebox in the corner played some old country tune, the kind Margaret used to hum while cooking. I pushed the thought away. Nostalgia wouldn't help me now. Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping. You sure about this? Once you start, there's no going back. I met his eyes. Steady. They made their choice. Now I make mine? He nodded, a glint of respect in his gaze. Then don't flinch. They'll squirm when you tighten the screws. I tucked the notebook away, my fingers brushing the rough fabric of my coat. The plan was forming, pieces clicking into place like the blueprints I used to draw. I'd been an engineer once, building things that lasted. This time I'd build their downfall, brick by careful brick. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table. The bourbon sat untouched, its surface still. Thanks. Richard, I'll call you. He waved me off. Don't call, just do it. The door to the old oak groaned as I pushed it open, the cold biting at my face. Snow crunched under my boots, the streetlights casting a pale glow over the empty sidewalk. My breath clouded in the air, but my mind was clear. David thought he could erase me. Rebecca thought she could outsmart me. They'd built their lives on my foundation, and I knew exactly where the cracks were. I walked on, the snow falling heavier now, each flake a reminder of the storm I was about to unleash. The kitchen was dark, save for the faint glow of my phone's flashlight cutting through the shadows. The oak table, usually a place for family meals, was now a battlefield of scattered papers, bills, receipts, a crumpled bank notice. David had left them out, careless as always, assuming I wouldn't notice. I moved quietly, my old sweater catching on the chair's edge as I leaned over the mess. Each document was a window into their world, and I was about to pry it open. I lifted a credit card statement, the numbers glaring under the light. $18,000 in debt, spread across designer clothes and restaurant tabs. Rebecca's name was on half the charges, including a $3,000 handbag that could have paid the heating bill twice over. I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. She'd mocked my outdated house while burning through money they didn't have. David wasn't much better. Late car payments, a gym membership he never used. Their greed was a house of cards, and I was ready to pull the first one. My fingers paused on a bank notice, the word overdue stamped in red. They'd missed 2 mortgage payments on a small condo they'd bought as an investment last year. David had bragged about it at dinner once, saying it would make them rich. Rebecca had nodded, her eyes gleaming as she scrolled through photos of luxury lofts on her phone. Now the bank was threatening to foreclose. I scribbled the account number in my notebook, the pen scratching loud in the silent house. A memory flickered. Rebecca at dinner last week, her voice dripping with disdain as she called my dining room carpet tacky. She'd waved her fork like a scepter, saying we needed modern elegance. David had laughed, agreeing, while I'd stared at the family photos on the wall, wondering when my son had stopped seeing this house as home. That carpet had been Margaret's choice, picked after hours of debate at the store. They wanted to rip it out, erase her, erase me. I froze, hearing a creak from the hallway. My heart thudded as I flicked off the flashlight, plunging the kitchen into darkness. The house was old, always groaning, but I couldn't risk being caught. I pressed myself against the counter, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge and the distant tick of the living room clock. I exhaled, my breath steadying. They were upstairs, probably asleep, oblivious to the trap they'd walked into. I turned the light back on, flipping through more papers. A receipt for a wine club subscription, another for a spa day Rebecca had needed. Every line was a thread in the web they'd spun, and I was mapping it out. My engineering days taught me to find weak points, cracks in a structure that could bring it down. Their finances were crumbling, and I'd make sure they felt every tremor. The notebook in my hand grew heavier with each note. Dates, amounts, account numbers. I tucked the bank notice into my pocket, careful not to crinkle it. This wasn't just about money. It was about control, about showing them I wasn't the relic they thought. I'd built this house, this life, and they tried to claim it without a fight. Big mistake. Another creak, closer this time. Footsteps, slow and heavy, descending the stairs. David. I snapped the notebook shut, shoving it into my pocket as I slipped the papers back into their messy pile. The flashlight went off, and I moved toward the kitchen door, my boots silent on the tile. My hand grazed the door frame, the wood cool under my fingers. I paused, listening as the footsteps stopped just outside. Dad. David's voice was groggy, suspicious. I didn't answer. My pulse was steady, my mind sharp. They'd given me the weapon I needed, wrapped in their own carelessness. I eased the door open a crack, the hinges silent from years of my maintenance. The hallway was dark, David's shadow looming at the far end. I slipped through, my breath held, and melted into the shadows of the house I knew better than they ever would. The lawyer's office was a stark contrast to my home. Glass walls, gray carpet, the air sharp with the scent of coffee and ink. I sat across from William, my old coat draped over the chair, a folder of notes open in front of me. The New York skyline loomed outside, its steel towers glinting under a pale winter sun. William, in a crisp suit, scanned my scribbled figures, his pen clicking rhythmically. I'd known him from my engineering days when we'd sorted out contracts for the firm. He was sharp, discreet, and didn't waste words. "You're sure about this?" "John?" he asked, his voice low, eyes flicking up from the page. "It's a bold move." I nodded, my hand steady on the table. "They crossed a line. William, I'm taking back what's mine." He leaned back, tapping the pen against his chin. "All right, let's start with the will. You want David out completely. Completely." The word felt heavy, final. A pang of guilt hit me. David was still my son, still the boy who'd once clung to my hand at the fair. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd spat in my face. I pushed the thought away. Focusing on the papers, William slid toward me. The first was a revised will, naming a local charity as my beneficiary. The house, my savings, everything. David and Rebecca wouldn't see a dime. I read it carefully, my old contract habits kicking in. Every clause was airtight, just as I'd wanted. I signed, the pen scratch a quiet victory. The second document was a bank form, freezing the joint account. David still used a relic from when I'd helped him buy his first car. He'd never bothered to close it. And now that laziness would cost him. William watched me, his expression unreadable. "You're cutting deep. John, they'll feel this." "They should have thought of that before," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel. I pulled out my phone, dialing the bank. A quick conversation, a few codes, and the account was locked. David wouldn't know until he tried to use it, and I could already imagine his panic. We moved to the house next. William suggested a trust, putting the property out of David's reach. "They can't force a sale if you're the sole trustee," he explained, scribbling notes. "And if they try to push you out, this gives you legal ground to stand on." I nodded, signing where he pointed. The house was my last bastion. The one thing I'd built that still stood strong. I'd poured my life into it. Every nail, every shingle. And I'd be damned if they turned it into their personal ATM. The pen felt like a hammer, sealing their fate with each stroke. William stacked the papers, his tone softening. "You okay, John?" "This isn't easy, I know." I looked at him, my jaw tight. "It's necessary." They made their choice. He didn't push. We shook hands, and I tucked the folder under my arm, the weight of it grounding me. As I stepped toward the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, David's name. A missed call. My pulse quickened, but I didn't answer. He was already feeling the ground shift, even if he didn't know why. The office door closed softly behind me, the city's hum swallowing the sound. I stood on the sidewalk, the wind biting through my coat. Snowflakes dusted my shoulders, melting into the wool. The folder in my hand was a shield, a weapon, a map to justice. David's call meant he was rattled, and that was just the start. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, ignoring the second buzz. Let him squirm. I had work to do. The living room glowed with the flicker of the TV. Some reality show droning in the background. David paced, his phone clutched like a lifeline, the screen's light casting shadows across his face. Rebecca lounged on the leather couch, legs crossed, her calm a stark contrast to his fury. I stood just outside, hidden in the kitchen's darkness. The door cracked open. My phone was in my hand, recording every word, every shout. They didn't know I was listening. didn't know the ground was crumbling beneath them. "You see this?" David thrust his phone toward Rebecca, his voice cracking. "The account's frozen. I tried to pay the car loan and it bounced." "Bounced?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Her tone cool. "Calm down. David, it's probably a glitch. Call the bank." "I did." He flung a magazine onto the floor, its pages splaying across the rug. "They said it's locked by the primary holder. That's Dad? Rebecca, he did this." I pressed closer to the door, my knuckles white around the phone. The bank had worked fast, just as I'd hoped. David's anger was raw, unfiltered, but it was Rebecca's reaction I watched for. She shifted, her manicured nails tapping the couch. "Your father? Why would he bother?" "Because he's spiteful," David snapped, pacing faster. "He's been sulking since we asked for the repair money. You heard him. He thinks he owns us." Rebecca's lips curved, a slow, calculating smile. "Then maybe it's time he leaves. This house is too big for him anyway. We could sell it, move somewhere better, somewhere modern." My chest tightened, but I kept still. The phone steady. Sell my house. The one I built with Margaret, where we'd raised David, where her laughter still echoed in the walls. They weren't just greedy, they were ruthless. I forced my breathing to slow, my engineer's mind clicking through their words, filing them away. Every syllable was evidence. Fuel for the fire I was stoking. David stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. "You think we can just kick him out?" Rebecca leaned forward, her voice low, conspiratorial. "He's old, David. Vulnerable. We'll say it's for his own good. Find him a nice little apartment somewhere cheap. The house stays with us. It's only fair." Fair. The word burned, but I didn't move. My thumb hovered over the phone, the recording ticking on. They were plotting right in front of me, oblivious to the noose tightening around them. I'd known they were selfish. But this was a new low. My home, my life, reduced to a stepping stone for their ambitions. David hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "He won't go quietly. You know how stubborn he is." "Then we make him," Rebecca said, her voice sharp now. "We'll talk to a lawyer, figure out our options. He can't stay here forever, dragging us down with him." The TV flickered, a laugh track jarring against the tension. I eased back, my boots silent on the tile. The door's shadow hid me as Rebecca stood, crossing to the window to check the lock. She was thorough. I'd give her that. But not thorough enough. My phone vibrated faintly as the recording saved, their voices trapped in its memory. I slipped into the kitchen, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. They thought they could outmaneuver me, erase me from my own life, but they just handed me everything I needed. Their plan was reckless, sloppy, built on arrogance. I'd use it, turn it against them, let their own words dig the grave they thought was mine. The kitchen door clicked shut behind me, the sound swallowed by the house's silence. I stood in the dark, the phone warm in my hand. They were plotting a war they couldn't win, and I was ready to strike back. The new lock on my front door gleamed under the porch light, its brass surface mocking me. My key, worn from years of use, didn't fit. I stood on the stoop, my breath clouding in the frigid air, snowflakes catching in the folds of my old coat. The house, my house, felt like a stranger's now. David and Rebecca had moved fast, faster than I'd expected. I turned the key again, the metal scraping uselessly, and a cold knot tightened in my chest. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to erase me. I stepped back, scanning the windows. The living room was dark, curtains drawn, but I knew they were inside, probably gloating. Earlier that day, I'd overheard snippets of their plan from a cousin's voicemail. David and Rebecca had hired a lawyer, claiming I was unstable, unfit to manage my own affairs. They'd spread the story to relatives, painting me as a senile old man who'd lost his grip. Now this lock. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a declaration of war. I circled the house, my boots crunching through the snow. The side door was locked, too, its new deadbolt as unyielding as the front. My fingers brushed the doorframe, remembering the summer I painted it with Margaret. Her laughter mixing with the smell of fresh paint. That memory stung, but I shoved it down. Sentiment wouldn't help me now. I needed a way in, or at least a way to turn this against them. Inside, I imagined David pacing, his voice sharp as he barked at their lawyer. I'd seen him like this before, red-faced, gesturing wildly, always needing to be the loudest in the room. Rebecca would be calmer, her words precise, twisting the narrative to make their betrayal sound noble. I could almost hear her. It's for his own good. He can't live alone anymore. The thought made my jaw clench. They didn't know me at all. I pulled out my phone. The screen's glow harsh against the night. Richard's number was at the top of my recent calls. I dialed, keeping my voice low as I leaned against the garage. They changed the locks, I said when he picked up, and they're telling everyone I'm crazy. Richard's laugh was rough, unamused. Bold move for a couple of amateurs. You got a plan working on it. I said, my eyes on the house. They're digging their own grave. I just need to push. Don't let them rattle you, he warned. They're scared. That's why they're pulling this stunt. Scared or not, they'd crossed a line. I hung up, slipping the phone into my pocket. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the yard in silence. I walked to the back door, testing the knob out of habit. Locked, of course, but as I turned away, my phone buzzed. A text from my sister-in-law. Susan. John, what's going on? David says you're not well. Call me. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. They'd gotten to Susan, too, spinning their lies to anyone who'd listen. The sting of betrayal deepened, but it wasn't despair. It was fuel. They thought they could isolate me, turn my own family against me. They'd underestimated how far I'd go to protect what was mine. I pocketed the phone and headed down the driveway, the snow muffling my steps. The street was quiet, Christmas lights blinking on neighboring houses, their warmth a cruel contrast to the cold radiating from my own. I stopped at the curb, glancing back at the locked door. They thought they'd won this round, thought they'd boxed me out, but I'd built that house, every beam and nail, and I knew its secrets better than they ever would. Let them gloat. I'd find my way back in. The cafe smelled of burnt coffee and cinnamon, its wooden tables cluttered with holiday shoppers' bags. I sat near the window, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the steam rising in lazy curls. Across from me, Patricia fidgeted with her spoon, her bright red scarf a splash of color against the gray day. She'd been Margaret's friend for decades, one of the few who still checked on me after the funeral. Now her eyes were wide with worry, her voice barely above a whisper as she leaned closer. John, I heard something you need to know, she said, glancing around like someone might overhear. David and Rebecca are planning a big Christmas dinner. They've invited the whole family. Susan, your cousins, everyone. They're going to make an announcement. I sipped my coffee, keeping my face neutral. What kind of announcement? Patricia hesitated, her spoon clinking against her cup. They're saying you're unfit, that you've lost control of the house, your finances. They want to declare you incompetent, maybe even push for guardianship. They're using the dinner to get everyone on their side. The words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I set the mug down, its base scraping the table, and leaned back. So that was their game. A public humiliation, dressed up as concern to strip me of everything. I could picture it. David raising a glass, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. Rebecca nodding along, her smile sharp as a blade. The family would be shocked, maybe even convinced, especially after the rumors they'd already spread. "How'd you hear this?" I asked, my tone calm despite the fire in my chest. "Susan mentioned it," Patricia said, her voice dropping lower. "She's worried, but David's got her half convinced you're not yourself. Rebecca's been calling everyone, saying you're a danger to yourself. It's awful." "John." I nodded, pulling out my phone and opening the Notes app. My thumbs moved quickly, jotting down the details. Christmas dinner, family, announcement, guardianship. Each word was a piece of their plan, and I was already turning it over in my mind, looking for cracks. They thought they could ambush me, use the holiday's warmth to mask their betrayal. But they'd just given me an opening, a stage to flip their script. Patricia watched me, her brow furrowed. "You're not surprised, are you?" "I'm not," I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. "They've been building to this. I just didn't expect them to play so dirty." She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. "What are you going to do? You can't let them get away with this." I met her gaze, my jaw tight. "I won't. They're counting on me to crumble. They'll get a surprise instead." Patricia's eyes softened, but she didn't press. She knew me well enough to trust I'd handle it. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table, and grabbed my coat. The cafe door jingled as I stepped outside, the cold biting at my face. Snow dusted the sidewalk, clinging to my boots as I walked. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Susan. Probably more questions I wouldn't answer. I ignored it, my mind racing. The Christmas dinner was their trap, but it could be mine, too. They wanted a spectacle, a moment to cement their victory. I'd give them one, just not the kind they expected. The street lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the snow. I checked my notes again, the words glowing on the screen. They'd opened a door to their own downfall, and I was ready to step through. The lawyer's office was a fortress of glass and steel, its air thick with the hum of efficiency. I sat across from William, my folder open on the polished table, papers spread like a battle map. William adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents I'd prepared. Eviction notices from David and Rebecca, a court order to freeze their shared accounts, and a list of their debts meticulously cross-referenced. My engineer's precision had served me well. Every detail accounted for, every loophole sealed. "This is ironclad." "John," William said, his voice clipped but approving. "The eviction notice is legal, backed by the trust you set up. They'll have 30 days to vacate once it's served. And the account freeze, effective immediately. You've got them cornered." I nodded, signing the final page. The pen's weight felt like a gavel, each stroke a step closer to justice. "And the evidence?" I asked, tapping the folder. Inside were recordings, bank statements, even screenshots of Rebecca's texts to relatives, all proving their intent to defraud me. I'd spent nights compiling it, my dining room table a war room of receipts and notes. William slid the folder into his briefcase. "More than enough. If they try to fight, this will bury them in court. You've done your homework." I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. Homework. That's what it felt like. Methodical, relentless, the way I'd once tackled blueprints. But this wasn't about buildings. It was about tearing down the lies David and Rebecca had built around my life. The thought of my son, once small enough to fit in my arms, now scheming to rob me, brought a familiar ache. I pushed it down. Regret wouldn't finish this. Next stop was the bank. A sterile box in the mall's heart, its gray walls lined with posters about savings plans. The young banker, his tie slightly crooked, typed furiously as I confirmed the freeze on David's accounts. All set? "Mr. Anderson," he said, his voice nervous like he sensed the weight of what I was doing. I thanked him, tucking the confirmation slip into my folder. The numbers were locked now. No more designer bags for Rebecca. No more reckless loans for David. Back in William's office, we finalized the last piece. A letter to serve at the Christmas dinner outlining their eviction and the consequences of their actions. I slipped it into a plain envelope, its edges crisp, and placed it in my briefcase. The folder inside held everything. Their debts, their lies, their recorded plot to oust me. It was my ace, ready to be played when the moment came. William stood, offering his hand. "You're ready? John, they won't see this coming." I shook his hand, my grip firm. They never did. Outside, the bank's glass doors swung shut behind me. The sound swallowed by the mall's holiday buzz. Shoppers hurried past, arms full of gift bags while Christmas lights twinkled above. I stopped, my briefcase heavy in my hand, and looked at the decorations. They reminded me of Margaret, how she'd hang lights on our porch every December. The memory softened me for a moment, but only a moment. David had chosen his path, and I'd chosen mine. Snow fell as I stepped into the parking lot, dusting my coat, my breath clouded in the air. But my mind was clear. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The dinner, their grand stage d'or. They thought they'd humiliate me, rally the family to their side. But I had the folder, the letter, the truth. The lights blinked on, their glow reflecting off the snow. I tightened my grip on the briefcase. Let them set the table. I'd bring the reckoning. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the scent of roasted turkey and pine mingling in the air. The old oak table was draped in a white cloth, set with Margaret's china, each plate a silent nod to better days. Relatives and friends filled the chairs. Susan, my cousins, a few neighbors, their faces a mix of anticipation and unease. David stood at the head, a wine glass in hand, his smile as polished as the new watch on his wrist. Rebecca sat beside him, her posture perfect, her eyes glinting with quiet triumph. I sat opposite, my hands folded, a plain folder tucked beneath my chair. They thought this was their moment. They were wrong. David cleared his throat, the room falling silent except for the faint clink of forks. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice loud, practiced. "This Christmas is special. It's about family, about moving forward. But there's something we need to address." I watched him, my face calm, though my pulse thrummed. The folder under my chair felt heavy, its contents a blade I'd honed for weeks. David's gaze flicked to me, a flash of disdain crossing his features. He raised his glass higher, his tone hardening. "Dad, we've talked about this. You're not well, this house, this life. It's too much for you. We've voted as a family. You're no longer part of it. It's time for you to leave." A gasp rippled through the room. Susan's hand flew to her mouth, and my cousin Richard leaned forward, frowning. Rebecca's smile widened, thin and sharp, as she nodded in agreement. The guests shifted, whispers breaking the silence, their eyes darting between David and me. They'd heard the rumors, David's lies about my instability, and now they waited for my collapse. I stood, slow and deliberate, my chair scraping the hardwood. Every eye was on me, the air thick with expectation. Is that so? David, I said, my voice steady, almost soft. You've decided I'm done. He smirked, emboldened. It's for your own good, Dad. You'll thank us later. I reached under the chair, pulling out the folder. Its plain cover drew curious glances, but David's confidence didn't waver. Rebecca leaned closer to him, whispering something, her fingers brushing his arm. I stepped forward, holding the folder out to him. A parting gift. Then, I said, my tone light but edged with steel. Open it. David hesitated, his smirk faltering. He took the folder, his fingers brushing the paper as if it might burn. The room was silent now, the candles flickering, casting shadows across his face. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the first page. An eviction notice, bold and unyielding, addressed to him and Rebecca. His breath caught, his hand trembling as he turned to the next document. A court order freezing their accounts, followed by a detailed list of their debts, their lies, their recorded plot to defraud me. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice cracking. The folder slipped, papers scattering across the table, landing near the turkey platter. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said, my gaze locked on his. "You thought you could take my home, my life, and call it yours. Read the rest. It's all there. Your debts, your plans, your words." Rebecca snatched a paper, her face paling as she read. "This is a lie," she snapped, but her voice shook, her composure crumbling. The guests leaned closer, reading over her shoulder, their whispers turning to murmurs of shock. Susan stood, grabbing a page, her eyes wide as she saw the truth. Screenshots of Rebecca's texts, the recording transcript, the bank notices. "David, is this true?" Susan asked, her voice sharp. "You tried to sell his house." He stammered, his glass clattering to the table, wine spilling across the cloth. It's not what it looks like." I stepped back, letting the chaos unfold. The folder was my weapon, and it had struck true. The front door loomed in the distance, its frame outlined by the hallway's dim light. Someone pointed to it, their voice lost in the growing clamor. I didn't move, my eyes on David. He thought he'd broken me. Now he was the one breaking. The dining room was a storm of voices, the once orderly table now a mess of spilled wine and scattered papers. David slumped in his chair, his hands clutching his head. The eviction notice crumpled in his fist. Rebecca stood, her face flushed, her manicured nails digging into a napkin as she tried to salvage her crumbling facade. The guests were on their feet, some shouting, others whispering, their eyes darting between the documents and the couple who'd betrayed me. I stood at the edge of the chaos, my hands in my pockets, watching their world unravel. "David, explain this," Susan demanded, waving a bank statement, her voice cutting through the noise. "You told us John was losing his mind, but this says you plan to sell his house." David's head snapped up, his eyes wild. "It's not true. He's twisting everything. We were trying to help him." "Help?" My cousin Richard barked, snatching a paper from the table. "This is a recording of you plotting to kick him out. You called him a burden." Rebecca stepped forward, her smile forced, her voice trembling. "Everyone, please calm down. There's been a misunderstanding. We only wanted what's best for John. Best Patricia." Margaret's old friend stood, her scarf slipping as she pointed at Rebecca. You lied to us. You spread rumors. Said he was crazy. Also, you could steal his home." The room erupted, guests talking over each other, some grabbing papers to read for themselves. A child at the far end of the table ducked behind her mother, startled by the shouting. Rebecca's eyes welled up, her mascara smudging, but she kept her chin high, clinging to the last scraps of her dignity. David, though, was unraveling faster. He lunged for the folder, trying to gather the papers, but Susan pulled it away, her face a mask of disgust. "Enough." "David," she snapped, "you've shamed this family." He turned to me, his voice breaking. "Dad, please tell them it's a mistake. We didn't mean it like that." I met his gaze, my expression unchanged. "You meant every word," I said, my voice low but firm. "You made your choice. Live with it." Rebecca grabbed his arm, her voice a desperate hiss. "John, we're sorry. We'll fix this. Just don't do this. We can work it out." I shook my head, stepping back. "You had years to work it out. You chose greed instead." The guests were moving now, some heading for the door, their coats already in hand. Richard threw a paperback on the table, muttering something about disgrace. Susan followed, pausing to look at me, her eyes soft with apology. I should have known better. "John," she said quietly, "I'm sorry." I nodded, saying nothing. The apologies didn't matter now. The truth was out, and it was sharper than any blade. David's shoulders shook, his voice rising to a plea. "Dad, you can't throw us out. This is our home, too. It's mine," I said, my words final. "Always was." I turned, walking toward the living room, the noise fading behind me. Rebecca's voice cracked, calling after me, but I didn't stop. The dining room door swung shut, muffling their pleas. I stood in the dark, the glow of Christmas lights filtering through the window, casting soft patterns on the floor. The family photos on the wall watched me. Margaret's smile, a faint echo of what we'd lost. I straightened one, my fingers lingering on the frame. Outside. Car doors slammed, engine starting as guests left. The house grew quieter, the storm subsiding. David and Rebecca were still in there, begging, bargaining, but it was over. They'd built their trap, and I'd turned it on them. The front door creaked open, then slammed shut, the sound sharp in the silence. I didn't look back. They'd made their bed, now they'd lie in it. They'd lie. My new apartment was small, its bare walls still unfamiliar, but the wide window offered a view of the New York skyline, its lights winking through the falling snow. I sat at a simple desk, a single lamp casting a warm glow over a blank sheet of paper. The pen in my hand felt heavy, not with ink, but with the weight of what I needed to say. Boxes lined the room, some unpacked, others holding pieces of a life I'd left behind. A photo of Margaret rested on a shelf, her smile steadying me as I began to write. The house was gone, sold for a good price to a young family who'd fill it with new memories. I'd walked away with enough to start over here in this quiet space where the past couldn't cling so tightly. The sale had been quick, the paperwork final, each signature a step toward freedom. David and Rebecca had vanished after that Christmas dinner. Their belongings cleared out before the eviction notice's deadline. I hadn't heard from them since, and I didn't expect to. Some bridges burned clean. I pressed the pen to the paper, the words coming slowly. "David." I wrote, my handwriting steady despite the ache in my chest. I've spent years wondering where I went wrong, what I could have done to keep you close. But you chose your path, and I had to choose mine. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to move on. This is goodbye. The words were simple, but they carried everything. The love I'd once had, the betrayal that broke it, the peace I was claiming now. I folded the letter, slipping it into a plain envelope. My fingers brushed the paper, lingering as I set it on the desk. Forgiveness wasn't for them. It was for me, a way to shed the last of their weight. I'd carried them long enough. Outside, the snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, blanketing the city in silence. I stood, crossing to the window, my reflection faint against the glass. The skyline stretched before me, its sharp edges softened by the storm. I'd built a life once in a house filled with laughter and dreams. That life was gone, but I wasn't. I was still here, still standing, with years left to shape something new. A box by the door held a few keepsakes: Margaret's favorite scarf, a drawing David had made at 7, a contract from my engineering days. I'd unpack them later when the time felt right. For now, I let the quiet settle, the apartment's stillness a contrast to the chaos of those final weeks. The Christmas dinner played in my mind. David's shout, Rebecca's tears, the guests' shock. But it was distant now, like a story I'd heard rather than lived. I picked up the envelope, tucking it into my coat pocket. The post office was a short walk, and I'd mail it tonight. Let it carry my words into the void. David might read it, might not. It didn't matter. I'd said what I needed to say. The desk lamp flickered, its light catching the snow outside. Each flake a tiny spark in the dark. I grabbed my coat, the envelope crinkling as I pulled it on. The apartment door clicked shut behind me, the sound soft but final. The hallway was empty, the building quiet, but the city waited beyond, alive with possibility. I stepped into the elevator, my boots leaving faint wet prints on the floor. The snow would keep falling, covering the old paths, making way for new ones. I was ready to walk them. As the elevator descended, I felt a quiet resolve settle in. The past was behind me, buried under the snow. But stories like this don't end there. They spark conversations. If this tale resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in my place? Drop your impressions, your questions, and let's discuss. Your insights keep the dialogue alive. Engage with the channel. Subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. To hear the next one, click the box on the left. Thank you for listening.